The opinions, viewpoints, and beliefs presented on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the management, the affiliates and broadcast partners, or the sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Scarefest Radio, the radio you can see.
And hello everyone, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Scarefest Television. We're still in the middle of our Halloween celebration. Everybody, tonight's guest is the lovely and talented Stephanie Bingham. I actually broke my own rule. Now, technically, you're not twice in one season, but you are twice in one calendar year.
It happens.
So basically, she was one of the first guests we had when COVID hit. I went back and was checking and I forget what, it had something to do with, I found the blurb for it, and it was like, we pulled her out of quarantine. And so she's back with us now, because there are a few people I trust when I talk to history more than Stephanie, because she's an actual historian.
Actual historian?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, you work for you're for a distiller. See, to me though, like a historian for a distillery, that's like, you know, the guy that mops up after ballerinas. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to me like, you know, you've got one building and you learn it, and then do you do like tours, or do you like write articles?
Do tours, do whatever they need, basically, all the archiving, things like that. Just whatever they happen to need that day is basically what I do. But before that, I worked for, 3 different museums for half a decade, so.
Yeah, but that was like bouncing ghost, I thought. So you actually did history for museums, too? Yeah,
that was my
Well, you are overqualified for this, then. Tonight, everybody, what we're doing, we're going to be talking about Halloween. And some of the traditions and such, and I obviously have a big wrinkle in my green screen behind me because it's going right up through the middle of everything. But don't worry about it; it'll be all right. Now everybody, before we even get started, I have to tell everybody. 2 weeks ago, you remember I was complaining because my internet went out, and so I finally called about it today. And what it is, I've got Verizon has this home internet, and they call it the cantenna. They call it the cantenna because basically the antenna on the outside of your house looks like a garbage can, and it's roughly the same size as a small garbage can. And now this is once again on the side of my house. So I called them, and they said, yes, we will replace that. All you have to do is crawl up on the side of your house and take it down, bring it in, and we will exchange it. Yes, they trust the great unwashed masses to disassemble their equipment in midair. So that's just a little something I wanted to share with everybody, that how the world works in 2020. Well, let's get into it now. I had an interesting experience last weekend to start off this conversation. I did one of my little ghost bouncer things, cooler things. Went into a location they'd been having some I wouldn't say violent activity, but like activity was costing them money. In other words, there was shit getting broken. So just so happened while I was there, come to find out, one of their recent employees they've hired is a witch. Mm-hmm. And my first question was, now, is she a theological witch or is she an internet witch? Because to me, they're two different things. There's some people that were raised with a tradition, and, you know, and and then other people read about it on the internet and say, "Oh, that's cool. I want to be a witch." But she apparently, it is a long tradition in her family. And one thing that came up that it wasn't a fight, but do you, in your experience as a with your psychic abilities and your mediumship, Is the veil thinner at Halloween this time of year?
It's supposed to be.
That's okay, yeah.
It is.
Do you find it to be thinner?
So up until about 5 or 6 years ago, I would notice a distinct change around Mabon, the last sort of holiday. It's where we go to the dark side of the year. It's the light side of the dark side, so it's where you would make that transition. It was essentially the equinox. And that's where it would happen, and it would get a little bit lighter, more ghosties, and more passage back and forth for the next several months until the next one, and then it would go back to the light side, and it would thicken. But for the last several years, I have not felt it thicken back like it used to.
So you're saying it just keeps getting thinner now? Is that what you're saying?
In my experience, yes.
Okay. See, my feelings on it started from back long before I ever delved into the psychic side of it. It was just being a ghost hunter. And I did find I got my best evidence in fall through spring. So I kind of thought that the same reason that when you touch a doorknob in December, it'll shock you, but it won't happen in July. And radio stations bounce better. AM radio stations bounce better in the wintertime. So I thought it was atmospheric. In other words, yeah, the veil was thinner, but it wasn't anything spooky about it. It was just the conditions. And I said that, and oh my God, no, Halloween is spooky. It's and the veil is thinner. It does happen twice a year, according to her. It's basically spring and Halloween, so there are two sides to that coin. But yeah, she was almost insulted that I said, no, it's not, Halloween's not a big deal when it comes to ghosts. So anyway, I just wanted to
I've never seen Halloween the holiday have more activity for me.
You haven't?
Not that specific day. This side of the year, sure, but not that specific day.
Well, is it even a day anymore? I mean, people were talking about Halloween back in August, just wanting to get everything else out of the way. It might have been enhanced by lockdown, but if to me there is more activity on Halloween, it's because there are more people asking for it.
More energy being poured into it. Yeah.
Yeah, more. And you know how I feel about that. No, it's just more people asking for it. It's not energy so much as the ghosts are going around. Oh, wait, they called. Finally. Okay, we got something to do. Now, everybody, if you watch my Facebook feed, you will see that I watched I did research for tonight's show. I watched a documentary called Feast of the Dying Sun. First of all, I've never heard it called that, but okay. And I'm used to Halloween documentaries, going back to explaining a little bit about Samhain and, how... No, this bitch was dark. I mean, it was... Okay, first of all, if you didn't watch it, you might not have caught, I actually said, watch this documentary and you will understand why all the costumes are like Slutty Nurse and Slutty Cat. And I had no idea that Halloween had we'll use the term sexual aspect to it. I thought that was a 20th century invention, but when I brought it up before the show, you were already on that ticket. Where the hell did that come from?
Well, the problem is if you look at the ancient Roman festivals in general, sex was a big part of it. There was this whole component in the stories and the mythology and how their worship happened that was very, you'd call it sex positive today. So
I don't know their god. I wouldn't call it sex positive because all of their gods raped people. That was
That's
true,
you
cut Zeus's nuts off and you've got no Greek mythology. 50%.
You lose a lot of it, that's for sure.
So, but I guess in my ignorance, see, I always thought of it as pretty much a Gaelic festival. Of course, that's
So Samhain was, but they took Lemuria, which was the Roman festival, and moved it, the Christians did, to coincide with Samhain. So that's where you get that association between death and Samhain happening, is right there, because they took the Celtic bonfire night and they moved Lemuria basically to be All Saints Day, which is the day after. So it sort of put the two holidays together, Christianized them, got the Celts on board. That's what they did with a lot of holidays. It just
let's face it. I mean, except for a couple of Old Testament things where babies died, there wasn't a lot to celebrate in the Christian religion. Christ was born, Christ was crucified. We're pretty much done after that. So, and I even understand why they wanted to fold these in, because people are going to celebrate this shit one way or the other.
Yep.
So, now I was surprised in a little bit more of my research that a lot of Christian, we'll call them faiths, I almost hate to say denominations, around the world actually really still embrace Halloween as an important religious holiday.
Mm-hmm. Halloween, you have to have that connection to the dead. You have to have that night before you go into the Feast of the Saints, and then All Souls Day after the Feast of the Saints. You have to have something that you're going into your two ghost holidays, basically. Your two official Christian ghost holidays. They're happening.
See, I don't even get that from a real... Okay, now, I've said it 100 times on the show. I was lucky growing up. I was not condemned by the church, or I was not prepared to be condemned by the church, I should say, because my church didn't give a rat's ass about Halloween. It was a nice holiday. We put up pumpkins and had a Halloween party. Everybody goes home. You're done. But a lot of denominations are anti-ghost. We'll say it that way. And so it surprises me to find out that is dichotomy the right word? In other words, there's two total extremes where one says, no, ghosts are all demons, and then the other one said, nah, they're ghosts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But you literally have those Christian holidays where you are celebrating and you are venerating the dead. I mean, you literally have to acknowledge them. So it's just that weird sort of thing. I mean, they took holidays that had nothing to do with each other and stuck them together. They just made it whatever would work best. And you really can't cut ghosts out. You can call them demons all day, but no matter what, all churches have to deal with the dead in one way or the other.
Well, yeah, but see, okay, now devil's advocate, really shitty term for this conversation. I understand some of the scripture behind it, but then I think, that's kind of contradictory to this. But in other words, I can understand the closest we ever came was kind of remembering our dead. In other words, our dead were gone to be with God, etc., etc. So that was something that was never taught, was that grandma's going to come back and want you to give her cookie recipe back, stuff like that. But how do they... Is it just a respect for the dead, or do they actually feel that they owe the dead something? How does that work in that side of the equation? Do you know?
So if you go back to one of the earliest instances we know of a dumb supper like that, you're going back to Egypt. They literally fed the ghosts. You would bring offerings, you would feed the ghosts. There were certain holidays that you had to do this on to keep the ghosts happy and to keep them from coming after you. That was an exceedingly prevalent view all through ancient times. So when the early church was forming, that was a worldview that pretty much everybody accepted as truth. So there was something that they had to deal with. And I think that is where a lot of that sort of idea of the hungry dead and giving the offerings to the dead comes from, is those ancient times when you had to appease the dead.
Okay, I understand. In other words, everybody was doing it anyway, so the church said, hey, we need to come up with an excuse. Okay.
Yep.
Fair enough. First commercial break, everybody. We'll be right back with more and Stephanie Bingham.
Everyone is talking about CBD oil, and it seems like almost everyone is using it. The research is ongoing, but the apparent health benefits are overwhelming. If you're going to use CBD products, though, what brand should you buy? First, find out where the hemp was grown. Imports are flooding the market. How potent is it? Look for a brand that plainly states its concentration on the label. And look for full spectrum CBD. This means the oil contains CBD and all the other cannabinoids, terpenes, and nutrients that are found in the entire cannabis plant. Look for Blue Leaf CBD oil. Blue Leaf Naturals is a Kentucky proud company. They use only Kentucky-grown hemp, supporting Kentucky farmers and businesses. Visit their website at blueleafcbd.com now and use the code SMILE at checkout for free shipping.
Hey, Scarefest, this is Joe Lewis of Bonehead Weekly. I'm trying out a new microphone, so you let me know how it sounds. This week, we are talking about a movie that's rated PG-13. It's a horror film that you can watch with not so small kiddies, but as they tend to grow up a little bit. It's based on a series of books that had art that scared the piss out of a lot of you. And the movie I'm talking about is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I know they'd been trying to get this a while, and actually it's produced by Guillermo del Toro, and he wrote it as well. He's one of the writers. And it's directed by a guy that I absolutely just think's amazing. Andre, I'm going to completely butcher it, Andre overall, who directed a movie called Troll Hunter and another one that's fan-freaking-tastic called The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I highly recommend. I wanted to catch this last fall when it came out, didn't get a chance to. I read some of the books. In fact, one of the stories that I remember very vividly is in the movie. So how do you take all these different stories and make a film out of it, but not make an anthology film? So there's not a bunch of stories, but there are a bunch of stories. Well, you set it in 1968, and you have some friends, and they find this book, and the book is based on, it's got a lady, and she's dead, and she's still writing stories, and these stories come to life and attack these kids and folks around the town. Did I like it? I like that they set it in 1968. I like the atmosphere of it. I like the first 30 minutes of it. I don't think I have a problem with the ending. In fact, this is for Wes and the rest of you. I'm not complaining about the ending at all. It's just fairly forgettable, though. Do I recommend it? Sure. Yes, I do. It is not a bad movie at all. It's very well produced. In fact, I like the way it looked. I've watched a lot of low budget shit the last few weeks for you all, and I was happy to see someone who had spent a few dollars in a movie that looked polished and finished and smooth. Honestly, it looked like a Hollywood production. And that may be the reason why I don't find it scary, but a couple of the monsters, they may look scary in those famous pages or those famous books that you all read as children, you know, that gave you nightmare fuel and made you the horrible person you are today who hangs around and watches Scarefest, hangs out with weirdos like me. To see them on the screen, not so much. I had a hard time getting into it a little bit. But I did enjoy the atmosphere. The acting is very good. There's just some groaners. There's some lines that I just couldn't get past. You don't read the book. The book reads you. To my knowledge, it is not streaming on anything. However, you can get it at Redbox. You can find it on DVD and Blu-ray. And it is family friendly. It is not like the Autopsy of Jane Doe with a lot of cursing and nudity. It is family friendly. PG-13 horror. Check it out if you haven't seen it, especially if you're a fan of those short stories. But you have time and you want to show your family a family-friendly PG horror film as we get closer to Halloween, and I'm going to do more as we get closer to Halloween, then I actually recommend The House with a Clock in Its Walls. It's a little more childlike and a little more kiddie-ish, but this one tries. It's pretty good. It's decent. I don't know. I have a hard time saying it's great, but I didn't dislike it. I enjoyed parts of it. Should you see it? Don't break your neck, but check it out. This has been Joe Lewis of Bonehead Weekly. Actually, if you're a fan of it, check out The Autopsy of Jane Doe and Troll Hunter. Those are both, I think Autopsy is on Amazon and Troll Hunter was on Netflix. So check those out. They even made a cartoon about Troll Hunter. It's a lot of fun. This has been Joe Lewis of Bonehead Weekly. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week's Scarefest Ooh, maybe I'll see you at that super secret. You know what I mean.
For you T-Virus fans, a Resident Evil reboot movie is coming in 2021. Reboot? Well, that sounds French. The movie will stick closer to the games and be an origin story set in 1998. The cast includes Robbie Amell, Kaya Scodelario, and Hannah John Kamen playing some of the game's iconic characters ready to kick zombie buttocks. Because one pandemic is never enough. And we're back with more Scarefest TV and our special super guest, Stephanie Bingham. Okay, now one thing I did that was kind of research, but it was cheating also. I actually just Googled Halloween traditions. And one list was quite promising. It was 15 traditions at Halloween in the explanation. But they padded the damn list by giving trick-or-treating like 3 different entries, because apparently there's 3 different origins from it. First of all, the pagan way. Now, that is the one that during Samhain, or as we say in the hills of Kentucky, Samhain, that people, kind of what you explained, they just leave plates of food out on the porch for the ghost as they go by.
Yeah. That's the very old sort of traditional thing, is on holidays that have to do with the dead, you want the dead not to come into the house. So if you can appease them outside with some sort of offering, then they'll stay outside. It's the same thing with it's the same kind of concept almost with the vampire stories of the time, where you'd leave seeds outside, they would count every one before they got to the house. So you could do it with that. I've heard it with werewolves as well, working the same way. It's either as a way to appease or as a way to confuse, so they don't come into the house where you are.
Now, the interesting twist to this story is that people started dressing up as the dead so they could swipe the food. That was, they just... Oh, and another thing that documentary told me, some people too, I think it was maybe for one of the other traditions, but for the, to disguise, because one of them, they actually disguised herself so the dead people wouldn't catch them. They turned their coat inside out, and I'm like, are ghosts that stupid?
That is a very old tradition, actually going back to fairy lore in the Celtic traditions. The idea is if you get face struck, if you're out in the woods and you are lost, you would turn your clothing, your jacket specifically, inside out, and it would break the enchantment on you. That is a deep, deep-seated thing that there are actually hundreds of accounts of it working for people, historically speaking. It's a very old, but a very...
Hundreds of accounts. Okay. Hey. How do they document that shit back then? Oh, I was enchanted over there, but I'm fine now.
It's the story of I was going out, I was lost in the woods, I was fairy struck, I was following that little light over there, I realized what was happening, I turned my jacket inside out and realized that I was walking into a pond. It was the gossip of the day,
Now going on, okay, now the next entry is the Scottish way, which is kind of where we're talking about here. And then it's all this evolved into basically, now this is where people actually started going around door to door begging. So, they would, but now back then it wasn't trick or treat.
No, it was not.
They would pray for you if you gave them food.
Sort of.
Well, that's what it says on the internet.
So the soul cakes were little raisin cakes, and children would go door to door knocking on the door, and if essentially the deal they were making was the children would pray for your dead relatives if you give them a bribe of this little cake, basically. And they would pray for your dead relatives who are in purgatory. So, and the more people that pray for you while you're in purgatory, the quicker you get out of purgatory, basically. So...
Okay.
Outsourcing.
Yeah. It's blackmail. Anyway, now, but then they say the American way, and according to the internet, our way is based strongly on the German American tradition called belsnickeling, of all things. Belsnickeling. I'm going to try to find out how to work that into the common everyday sentence. Just you've belsnickled me, but yeah, this is where the actual disguise came in. They would actually try to disguise themselves as other people, and let's see, it actually says would dress in costume and then call on their neighbors to see if the adults could guess the identities of the disguised guest. Then somehow, if the children pulled it off, they get food or treats. But so belsnickeling. Has anybody ever actually figured out when? Because now I've heard that in America, it took a long time for Halloween to get traction.
Oh, absolutely. The first documented occurrence of Halloween being celebrated or written about being a thing in the USA happened in 1833. And that was essentially a gathering of people getting together to tell ghost stories. But there really wasn't much more than that. When you get on to, say, like mischief nights, that was happening in the Victorian era. The 1800s you're looking at there for that starting to happen and being a thing. But again, it's people coming from Europe bringing those traditions of the bonfire nights and the mischief nights there, and that sort of catching on in the U.S. But trick-or-treating as we know it, or Halloween as we know it, did not arrive and did not start in the U.S. until at least the 1930s at the earliest.
Cool. I even heard later than that, as far as actually people in mass doing it. Now, you kind of referred to
absolutely.
Yeah.
The first evidence we sort of have of trick-or-treating being used to sort of derail mischief night was in the 1930s, because a gardener kept having her garden essentially destroyed by hooligan children. So she basically planned a big party, gave them all treats, and had like a little parade with them, marching them with a band, and they were too exhausted to essentially destroy her garden.
What were you telling me before? What were you telling me before about everybody opening the gates and letting the cows out?
That's one of the major things they did on mischief night, is that was the thing the kids would do. They would go out, and that was like the thing. You would go out, you would remove all the gates on all the farmers' fields and let all the creatures out. And that was like the big thing they do. They'd put buggies in like haystacks and break windows and throw rocks. And apparently it was very common in cities for like hooligans to move the stairs to people's houses. Like the ones that weren't concreted down, they would move them. So when you walked out in the morning, you would just fall. So
and then you get more ghosts.
Yeah, exactly.
Now this is kind of a side note. They put it in the list, but I associate black cats with Halloween decorations. I never really associated that, because of the whole witchcraft aspect and all that.
Yeah.
I never really associated black cats directly in a straight line with Halloween. My question, how did black cats get this bad rep? We have had 2 of them, and they are the sweetest animals of all the breeds of cat possible. These things are just unforgettable.
They are. They're great little things. Cats, historically speaking, have always had this sort of weird liminal state between, is it a person? Is it a fairy? Is it a djinn? What is it? So depending on where you're at culturally, everybody always thought that cats were a little weird. I have one, I can confirm. Cats are weird animals, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was just that sort of weird thing. And I think specifically when you get into the Christian cultures, you're looking at black being associated with the devil, the black dog, the hellhound. You have the black cat falling into that same sort of line of dark animals. And when you have a creature like a cat that's been associated with magic since ancient times, it's very easy to make that into clearly it must be a witch's creature. And when you think about witches being the healers of the time, the women that would live out in the woods by themselves, you know, you're going to have cats, and they're going to be in your house, and they're going to be next to your cauldron, which everyone had, sitting next to your broom. So when you came out there on your witch hunt to find that witch, you're going to see the broom and the cauldron, and oh, look, her cat over there. You know.
Okay, now this might be something for the chat room. We tend to collect an eclectic bunch. Are there any witches in the chat room? And I want to know if being a witch gives you a predisposition to want a black, in particular, black cat. What do you know that I don't know, Stephanie?
Most witches I know have cats. Very few of them are black. I should go with black, though, because all of my wardrobe is black.
And now, do you know why? I can tell you why. There should be a attraction to black cats, because their hair doesn't show up on witch outfits as bad.
Exactly.
So there's that. Now, before we go to commercial break, I got one more thing I want to bring up. Okay, bobbing for apples. First of all, I always thought that was the dumbest thing that was ever associated with Halloween. It was something I did as a kid, and as a teenager, and maybe even as an adult. I don't remember. How did bobbing for apples become part of this Halloween tradition?
It again goes back to that sort of fall harvest festival. The time that you're actually celebrating. Samhain was the final sort of harvest festival of the year. You're taking in all of your items, you're getting them there, you're going to have a feast. There's going to be apples, you're trying to entertain yourself. It's just one of those things that is literally, we've got a bunch of extra stuff, what are we going to do with it? That's a very common sort of explanation for that. And if I had to guess, I mean, people get creative.
Now, the documentary that I watched actually gave this a totally dark side. But now the internet that I'm looking at here, it basically ties its origins to a courting ritual, which is a softcore way of saying what the documentary said. And I'm trying to figure out how you can tie bobbing for apples to courting, unless you really go down a dark road, and, you know, when she comes up with an apple in her mouth, and you just, yeah, that's the one for me.
Essentially. But I mean, at that point, it's sort of what that sensationalist history people get into, talking about how, Ouija boards were this great thing for people to date with, because it was a dating game. Essentially, you're sitting close together, your feet are touching, your hands are touching. So if you're taking it and looking at the bobbing for apples as a dating thing, it was literally a matter of, the girl is getting wet, her dress is getting wet, the guy is getting wet, her shirt is getting wet, you're getting close together. Oh, if she falls in, I have to help her out, and then I'll have to give her my coat.
Yeah, because the water's always freaking cold.
Exactly, and it literally requires physical contact, which was not allowed in later time periods.
That was a very nice way of putting because I was going down this whole dark road with, oh, look, that's 2 apples she's got. Anyway, everybody, we're going to take a commercial break. We'll be back in a few minutes with more with Stephanie Bingham.
Spirit Mechanics is here to help. Their background includes many different specialties across the metaphysical spectrum, including alchemy, shamanism, Celtic witchcraft, angelic magic, astral travel, and more.
With over 30 years combined experience in the group, you can be confident in their ability to help. If there is a question you have that you cannot answer, they will do their best to assist you.
Metaphysics can be intimidating, confusing, and unfortunately, abused. Spirit Mechanics takes pride in being selfless in the pursuit of helping others, being humble and honest with their clients about their questions, and lastly, maintaining a professional and personable atmosphere. They want you to feel as you are coming to a close friend, and they will do everything in their power to make you comfortable and safe.
Horror. Movie. Fans. 4. life. Find us. 4 news. 4 memes. 4 life.
Spooky season wouldn't be complete without horror, gore, and of course, pumpkins. And this week, back in 1988, all things spooky came together in the film Pumpkinhead. After a tragic accident takes the life of his young son, a grieving father seeks out a witch who helps him get revenge. The witch conjures up a demon named Pumpkinhead who hunts down and kills the teenagers responsible for the boy's death. Pumpkinhead was the directorial debut of special effects artist Stan Winston, and although it was not a commercial success, Pumpkinhead has gone on to become a cult classic and is listed in Fangoria's top 100 best horror movies you've never seen. Nothing is quite as terrifying as a creepy doll or puppet, and back in 1989, things got even more terrifying with the release of Puppet Master. A group of psychic friends come together after a former colleague sends them ominous messages and then commits suicide. The group of friends decide to investigate the mansion their friend died in, only to discover that things aren't quite as they seem and they are being hunted by murderous puppets. Puppet Master was released straight to video in October of 1989 in order to capitalize on Halloween season, and it worked. It has since gone on to become a cult fan favorite and has spawned 12 sequels. Now, the whole associate jack-o'-lanterns.
Mm-hmm.
Give the official explanation. I know you know it, and then I'm going to talk about the dichotomy of it, but...
So there are a few sort of explanations for it. Jack-o'-lantern was an actual character in mythology to begin with. He was a gentleman who had died, gotten himself kicked out of hell for essentially being too rowdy. And while roaming the world because hell wouldn't take him and he couldn't go to heaven, essentially, the devil felt sorry for him and gave him a coal of hell. And he put it inside a turnip and would walk with a carved turnip around the countryside.
Now, first of all, I want to ask, is that because they just had like an abundance of turnips? I can't imagine. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, turnips were a food stuff that they had that was essentially carvable. I mean, other than that, you had potatoes, which I don't think would make very good jack-o'-lanterns, but I suppose you could try.
Well, to me, they'd make as good of one as a turnip. Turnips are hard.
Exactly, so it would hold the light and you could leave them outside. One of the other sort of things, like that was the story of jack-o'-lantern. So the idea was if you carved a turnip and you left it outside on these nights when the ghosts were supposed to be able to come back and forth between the veil, it would scare them away. That's why they had scary sort of leering faces. That sort of big smile on a jack-o'-lantern is like that rictus grin that you get from a dead body actually sort of contracting in on itself. It's rigor mortis setting in. So you'd have these sort of grotesque faces on them, those scary ideas to scare the ghosts away, basically.
So basically, the theme behind Halloween is a ghost are stupid and pussies. That's, okay. Now, how did we transform that into... pumpkins? Were we just somebody realized that it was a lot easier to carve a pumpkin? Is that pretty much how it went down?
World fruit. They weren't native to Europe, so they didn't have them. So when they came to North America, we have these great big gorgeous squashes that are much easier to deal with, and that's basically exactly what happened. It's a lot easier to carve a pumpkin than a turnip. I've done both, and I can attest pumpkins are much easier.
So essentially, lazy Americans are the reason that we have jack-o'-lanterns as we know them today. I was hoping it was something sexier.
No, it's not. And kids would put them on sticks and actually walk around with them with sheets underneath them, sort of mimicking that shroud you put over a dead body. And they'd stick them up in people's windows on mischief night to scare them. So that was sort of what the kids would do, mimicking jack-o'-lantern.
Now, one more thing that I hadn't really thought about, and I think they touched on it in the documentary, but a big tradition is fire. Both, I never put the two together, but we have the tradition of bonfires, and we have the tradition of candles. And so what do you know about the bonfire end of it?
So bonfires originated with the Samhain festivals. It was a very common thing at the time in several different festivals around all of Europe, really, essentially, that you'd have these bonfires on these harvest nights, and it's sort of getting through that dark night, and it was bringing light to the darkness, and sort of that idea of conquering or staying safe in the darkness. The flame, the fire, was safety. It kept you warm, it kept you safe. That was the sort of basic overarching idea that went into a lot of the veneration of flames. But later you had the addition of Guy Fawkes on the 5th of November, blowing up or trying to blow up London. And that actually turned into a bonfire night as well. So you have this sort of dueling bonfire night that ended up causing a lot of mischief and a lot of issues in England specifically, because you had a bonfire night specifically on the 31st and on the 5th of November. So people were having bonfires for a week, essentially.
Now, once again, candles. Did Americans say, oh, we don't have time to build a bonfire? You know, look, there's a fire. Or is the candle, because, I think people associate candles more with the more traditional aspects of it, the witches, the
Candles are there. Candles are also deeply ingrained in the Catholic Church. You light a candle as a remembrance. It is a religious symbol and a secular symbol at that point. Also, if it's the middle of fall and you are in an area that burns well, a bonfire might not be the best idea. So when you come to the US and there are large swatches of things that like to burn, it might be safer in and of itself to have a candle and a pumpkin as opposed to a bonfire in a field.
So once again, Americans jacked it up for everybody. Now, okay, the religion, in other words, that's another one I think the Christian church snuck in. Let's use candles instead because we've got so damn many of them. Now, I don't even remember what it was, but now one of the Halloween traditions, it's apparently not in my list of 15 Halloween traditions. Some of the traditions that follow Halloween are basically kind of like bobbing for apples, except that it was, what were they talking about where you could actually, you'd see your future husband?
The mirror.
I'm sure it had something. What do you know? You threw out mirror. What do they do? I don't even remember that one from the church parties that I went to.
So it actually was a very common sort of folk magic in the U.S. To essentially say a little spell, and then you're going to look in a mirror, and the first person, the face that you see, is the man you're going to marry. It was something that girls would do just as a sort of way to kill time. It's actually one of the things that Titubo was accused of, was that, and actually fortune telling using egg yolks in water, specifically. So it goes back to Salem even in the US, but it's these little sort of folksy magics to tell health and wealth and things like that are going to happen in your future, that led to a lot of the witch panics and things like that. So kids going against their parents would play these games, and it was that sort of edgy little, ooh, if we get caught, it'll, we're witches. But it was a very common sort of folk magic.
Okay, let's take our last commercial break, and we'll be back with a few more minutes with Stephanie right after these messages.
Mama Ruby offers fun vendor-based events that focus primarily on the metaphysical and spiritual aspects of our lives. Well, 2020 didn't go as planned, to say the least. Since Mama Ruby's can't bring the vendors to you in person, they still encourage you to support them online. For links to these and other outstanding artists, craftspeople, vendors, and psychics, visit mamarubies.com and click shop.
When the drum beats, we hear the call of spirit. Join Coyote Chris Sutton and Charlotte Hardin as they discuss the different spiritual paths with those who walk them. Monthly on scarefestradio.com. Watch the Scarefest Facebook page for updates.
True crime horror history begins this week, back in 1888 London, England, where infamous serial killer Jack the Ripper was instilling fear all across the Whitechapel district of London. On October 15th, 1888, investigators in charge of the Ripper case received the now infamous From Hell letter. Included with the letter was a jar containing half a human kidney, and in the letter Jack the Ripper explained that he had eaten the other half of the kidney and his killings would continue. Although his full body count is unknown, he was positively linked to 5 killings and suspected of numerous others. Although there has been speculation over the years as to his identity, Jack the Ripper was never caught or identified.
Hello, monsters. Wicked World Scaregrounds resident research nurse Lily here to share some tips with you on not spreading your germs. First up, sanitize and wash your hands often for at least 20 seconds with soap and water. Citrus cyanide. No, don't eat it, sweetheart. Wash your hands with it. Also, clean and sanitize frequently touched objects and surfaces. And every time you're in public, always wear your face mask. Not what I was talking about, Melosha, but whatever. And Sarah, I know it's allergy season, but stop rubbing your eyes. And lastly, always make sure you maintain a distance of at least 6 feet between you and other creatures. For reference, that's 2 arms lengths. So, be safe, behave, so you can be back here at Wicked World Scaregrounds for fun and frights with us soon.
And everybody, don't forget wickedworldscaregrounds.com. Wickedworldscaregrounds.com. They are open for business this Halloween season. We're talking to Stephanie Bingham, one of my favorite psychic medium type people and historians. We've had a fun time tonight. Now, let's talk business. First time, when you were on earlier this year, you were, other than, I believe you told me that the ghost seemed like kind of confused.
Hungry. Yeah.
Did you use that word? I remember confused that nobody was hanging out with them.
Basically.
I'm beginning to get some input now that they're finally getting bitchy about it.
I'm hearing a lot of the same thing. I've been taking the quarantine and sort of going to haunted places near me because I was bored. And that's exactly what I'm seeing. Like, I went up to the Loveland Castle up in Cincinnati. Very strange, very odd, very... The ghost almost felt sad. That particular place has never felt sad before. It's a child there. So it's very sort of strange in that particular case. It was lonely. So I would, yeah, ghosts are not loving it.
Do you think now? Okay, my theory is that what I've been sensing from the middle of March, all of this negative emotion is starting to affect them also. I don't, at the time we thought it was, when we talked before, we were talking about how they just don't have any visitors.
Mm-hmm.
But the place that I had to go earlier this week, their activity was ramping up and getting more destructive. And they've been open. They've had people,
Mm-hmm.
but they've had, I guess, mostly grumpy white women. I don't know. The Karens of the world.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, the impressions we got were that, in particular, one ghost in particular, one of them, he's been grumpy. That's his shtick. He does. But the other one was getting progressively grumpier, for lack of a better way to put it. And so
that built negative energy is affecting them finally. That's a strong theory, at least in certain locations.
Well, could you ask them? Would they know?
That gets into the type of ghost and how actual cognizant they are of their particular situation.
Yeah, because I mean, they got fooled by turnips,
Not all ghosts are fooled by turnips, just the dumb ones.
Just Scottish ghost.
Just the Scottish ghost, yes, okay, absolutely.
Scottish. And now, just so I don't get messed up here, now basically that whole tradition though carried from Scotland and Ireland, pretty much carried because they have the same accent. They like follow the same shit, right?
Not quite that. It's the geography of the area. That area, especially England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, had a lot of interlocking trade, a lot of interlocking culture, a lot of interlocking everything. So if it happened in one place, the sort of concept spread around there. And if it happened long enough, everybody ended up doing it. So it sort of became just a British Isles tradition. And potato famine drove a lot of people out, drove them to the U.S., lots of those traditions came during that specific issue.
Because we always have potatoes.
We have lots of potatoes.
We always have potatoes. Last time I talked to you, it was the beginning of lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've mentioned you've obviously ventured out of the house a little bit. How are you taking the limitations of COVID-19 personally?
It's not my favorite thing in the world. I'm not the most people-y person to begin with, so I like my space, I like my time, I like the space that it gives you. I don't like the boundaries that it puts on you. It's not doing great things for my sort of quirks, if you will. It feels like the ghosts that I do come across when I do end up somewhere new are a little more insistent than they would have been beforehand. It's not quite as easy to push them away. I don't know if I'm out of practice or if they're just getting pushier at this point, but it's changed.
But are you ready to push baby ducks in the pond? See, I agree with you. I'm not, even though I talk a lot about drinking, when it gets right down to it, I don't go out that often. I'm not, I'm a farmer, I'm here on the, but there are things that I miss that I don't even really like when it gets right down to it. And I'm kind of like what you said. I think it's the fact that they're telling me that I can't do them.
Yep.
That I just want to do my 3-year-old tantrum and say, yes, I will eat boogers,
Absolutely. Like, I don't drink at all. I haven't been to a restaurant since March. I would love to be able to feel safe going in and sitting down and eating at a restaurant. That sounds great. Or going to a show, like an actual theater show, or going to a convention. Everything's been canceled. Any sort of ghost hunts. There's been no public events for Halloween and things like that. It's just very, very sad, very isolating.
The of course, Mystical Market. If anybody was able to hear me when I was talking about it, that's this weekend. That is the first true public event that I've done since last January, because I don't do that many in spring. And then right now they've still got that event scheduled for this coming January, so we'll see how that event goes. But now we have been to the movies a couple times. Our local haunted theater has showed some old movies, so and I felt safe in there because they had us pretty far apart. But at the same time, I'm convinced that this is all airborne. In other words, I really believe you could go to Walmart, you could go to Dollar Store, you go wherever you want, come home and lick your fucking hands clean, and you won't get this. But if you're sitting too close to someone in church when they sing, then you're toast. So that's kind of where I'm going with my beliefs. If you want to. So
I'm not sure I'd lick my hands clean, but I tend to agree with you. But I have been loving being able to go to the drive-in movies. That has been excellent.
Yeah, those bitches might have to go year-round this year. That's been a very popular thing. They say Bourbon Drive-In is just been bumper to bumper.
Last few times I went, they were sold out.
Yeah, and even the Ross Opera House, where I go see movies, they were at their COVID capacity. In other words, yeah, now that was, once again, that was like 1/3 of their normal capacity. But in that theater, they actually, before COVID, didn't have that many people going to see the movies there most nights. I mean, they'd have some nights they'd sell it pretty good. But it's actually, once they was able to get movies, I think it's been pretty good for them. So anyway, everybody, this has been Scarefest Television. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on reasonably short notice to talk about Halloween with me. This might have been the most fun show we ever had.
It was a lot of fun. Absolutely.
So we've got next week, everybody, if everything works out, because I'm not counting on anything in 2020, but we do have Circus Envy coming on to make clown jokes and that kind of stuff. But anyway, it's, in other words, Spooky Clown next week. I'm thinking about introducing another Halloween character that I've got in the works. And then on the 30th, we're going to do call-in night. Don't forget, October 30th, call in with your own personal ghost stories, whether it's something you grew up with, something you experienced, anything that does not involve a K2 meter or a ghost box, and we will listen to you tell it. Everybody, this has been Scarefest Television.